Millionaire without a translator for $900 million meeting. Poor 7-year-old girl speaks Dutch in front of him, and their lives change completely after this meeting. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Marcus Wellington adjusted his Armani tie for the third time as his black Mercedes pulled up to the towering glass building in Amsterdam's financial district. At 38, he had built a tech empire worth over $2 billion, but today's meeting could either make him the richest man in Silicon Valley or destroy everything he'd worked for. $900 million hung in the balance. "Sir, your translator called in sick this morning." His assistant Sarah's voice crackled through his phone. "Food poisoning. I'm trying to find a replacement, but everyone qualified is already booked." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The Dutch investors were notoriously particular about conducting business in their native language. Without a translator, this deal was dead in the water. 20 years of building his company, and it could all crumble because of food poisoning. "Keep trying, Sarah. I'll stall them somehow." As he stepped onto the busy Amsterdam street, the cold October air bit at his face. Pedestrians hurried past, their conversations a blur of Dutch, English, and other languages he couldn't identify. The meeting was in 30 minutes. Panic started creeping up his chest like ice water. That's when he heard it, a small voice speaking perfect Dutch to an elderly woman at a flower stand across the street. "Grootmoeder heeft vandaag geen geld voor bloemen, maar misschien morgen?" Marcus's head snapped toward the voice. A tiny girl, no more than 7 years old, with tangled blonde hair and clothes that had seen better days, was explaining to the vendor that her grandmother had no money for flowers today, but maybe tomorrow. Her Dutch was flawless, musical even. Without thinking, Marcus crossed the street. The flower vendor was shaking his head sympathetically when Marcus approached. The little girl looked up at him with the brightest blue eyes he'd ever seen, eyes that seemed far too wise for someone so young. "Excuse me," Marcus said gently, crouching down to her level. "Do you speak English too?" The girl nodded shyly. "Yes, sir. My name is Emma." "Emma, I'm Marcus. I heard you speaking Dutch. You're very good. Do you know any other languages?" Emma's face lit up slightly. "I speak Dutch, English, German, and a little French. Grootmoeder taught me. She says languages are windows to the world." Marcus felt his heart racing, but not from panic this time, from hope. "Emma, how would you like to help me with something very important? I need someone who speaks perfect Dutch for a business meeting. Would you like to earn some money to buy flowers for your grandmother?" Emma's eyes grew wide. She glanced back toward a narrow alley where an elderly woman sat on a wooden crate, coughing into a handkerchief. "How much money?" Emma whispered. "Enough for flowers, medicine for your grandmother, and a warm meal for both of you." Emma bit her lower lip, considering. What kind of meeting? The kind that could change both our lives forever. 20 minutes later, Marcus Wellington walked into the most important meeting of his career with a 7-year-old girl by his side, wearing a too large business blazer Sarah had hastily purchased from a nearby store. The Dutch executive stared in stunned silence as Emma, standing on a phone book to reach the conference table, introduced herself in flawless Dutch with the confidence of someone 3 times her age. But as Emma began translating Marcus's opening remarks, something shifted in the room. The investors leaned forward, captivated not just by her perfect pronunciation, but by something else, an intelligence, a presence that seemed to fill the space around her. Marcus realized he wasn't just watching a translation, he was watching magic happen. And in that moment, as Emma's voice carried his words across the language barrier with an eloquence that stunned the room into silence, Marcus Wellington had no idea that this little girl would soon turn his carefully ordered world completely upside down. The meeting was just beginning, But somehow, Marcus already knew nothing would ever be the same. The silence in the conference room was deafening. Emma had just finished translating Marcus's proposal, and the 5 Dutch executives sat motionless, their eyes fixed on the little girl who spoke their language with the precision of a university professor and the confidence of someone 3 times her age. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his leather chair, watching the investors' faces for any sign of their reaction. This was supposed to be the most important presentation of his career, but instead of focusing on his $900 million proposal, everyone was staring at Emma in stunned amazement. Meneer Wellington, the lead investor, Henrik van der Berg, finally spoke in heavily accented English, his weathered face creased with confusion and something that looked like awe. "In 30 years of business, I have never." He paused, shaking his head, then switched to rapid Dutch, speaking directly to Emma. Emma listened intently, her small hands folded professionally on the polished conference table. When Henrik finished, she turned to Marcus with complete composure. "He says he's never seen someone so young command a room with such presence. He wants to know if you planned this, if bringing me was some kind of psychological strategy." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "Tell him the truth. This was completely unexpected. I was desperate for a translator, and you offered to help." As Emma translated his response, Henrik's eyebrows shot up. He exchanged rapid glances with his colleagues, then began asking Emma direct questions in Dutch about her background, her education, her understanding of international business. What happened next defied every expectation Marcus had about 7-year-olds. Emma didn't just answer the questions. She engaged in sophisticated dialogue that left the room speechless. She discussed the historical significance of Dutch-American trade relations, referenced specific economic policies from the 1990s, and even suggested modifications to Marcus's profit-sharing structure that made Henrik lean forward with genuine interest. "Wait," Marcus interrupted after 20 minutes of this extraordinary exchange. "Emma, how do you know about international trade policies?" Emma shrugged as if it were obvious. "Grootmoeder has lots of books. I read everything. Numbers and patterns make sense to me. They always have." By the time the meeting ended 3 hours later, Marcus had not only secured his $900 million deal, but had watched a 7-year-old girl negotiate herself a consulting fee that would make most executives weep with envy. Henrik had personally shaken Emma's hand and invited her to visit their offices any time she was in Amsterdam. But as they walked through the building's marble lobby, Emma suddenly stopped dead in her tracks. Her face went pale, and she grabbed Marcus's arm with surprising strength. "We need to go back to Grootmoeder," she whispered urgently. "Right now. Something's very wrong." Marcus looked down at her, seeing genuine fear in those impossibly blue eyes. "How can you possibly know that?" Emma's grip tightened. "I just know. Please, we have to hurry." They found Emma's grandmother, Wilhelmina, collapsed in the narrow alley behind the flower market, her frail body crumpled against a brick wall like a discarded doll. Her breathing was shallow and labored, each breath a visible struggle. The wooden crate she had been sitting on was overturned, and her worn leather purse had spilled its meager contents across the dirty cobblestones. "Grootmoeder!" Emma dropped to her knees beside the elderly woman, her small hands shaking as she checked for a pulse. "Marcus, call for help. Now!" And while Marcus frantically dialed emergency services, Emma whispered something in Dutch to Wilhelmina, her voice gentle but urgent. The old woman's eyes fluttered open, and she managed a weak smile when she saw Emma's worried face hovering above her. "Ik ben okay, Kleine," Wilhelmina whispered. "Just tired." "No, you're not okay," Emma replied in English, her mature vocabulary jarring coming from such a young voice. "Your heart is struggling. You've been hiding how sick you are, haven't you?" The ambulance arrived within minutes. its red lights painting the grey alley walls in urgent strokes. As paramedics loaded Wilhelmina onto a stretcher, Emma held her grandmother's hand and spoke to her in rapid Dutch. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but the love and concern in Emma's voice were universal. At the hospital, while doctors worked behind closed doors, Marcus sat with Emma in a sterile waiting room that smelled of disinfectant and fear. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the little girl's worried face. "She's been hiding her heart condition from me," Emma explained quietly, her legs swinging from the adult-sized chair. "She thought if I knew how sick she was, I'd worry too much to focus on my studies." Marcus studied the remarkable child beside him. "Emma, can I ask you something? Back at the building, how did you know your grandmother was in trouble?" Emma was quiet for a long moment, staring at her scuffed shoes. "I can sense things about people," she finally admitted. "Their emotions, their physical state, sometimes even their intentions. It's like I can feel what they're feeling, but from the inside..." Grootmoeder says it's a gift, but sometimes it feels overwhelming. "What do you mean?" "In your meeting today, I could feel everyone's emotions changing. The investors went from skeptical to impressed to genuinely excited about working with you. But I also sensed something else. One of them, the man with the grey beard and the expensive watch, he was planning something that could be dangerous for you." Before Marcus could process this revelation fully, a doctor in green scrubs approached them. Dr. Janssen was a kind-faced man in his 50s who spoke excellent English. "Wilhelmina was stable," he explained, "but she had suffered a minor heart attack. She needed surgery to install a pacemaker, an expensive procedure that would cost more than most people earned in a year." "I'll take care of the expenses," Marcus said without hesitation. "Whatever she needs." Emma looked up at him with those impossibly wise blue eyes, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest. "Why would you help us?" she asked simply. "You've known us for less than a day." Marcus paused, surprised by his own certainty. "Because for the first time in 20 years of building my business, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Like this meeting, finding you, all of it happened for a reason." Boom! But as they settled in for a long night at the hospital, neither Marcus nor Emma realized that her warning about the grey-bearded investor was about to become the least of their problems. In the shadows outside the hospital, someone was already making phone calls, and Emma's unique abilities had not gone unnoticed by very dangerous people. 3 days later, Marcus was pacing the length of his luxurious hotel suite like a caged animal, while Emma sat cross-legged on the Persian carpet, absorbed in an advanced calculus textbook he'd purchased from the university bookstore. Wilhelmina was recovering remarkably well from her surgery, but the hospital's social services department had become increasingly interested in Emma's unusual situation. "Mr. Wellington, Mrs. De Vries, the lead social worker, had said that morning during what was supposed to be a routine check-in, "We need to understand the exact nature of your relationship with this child. You claim to be her business partner, her translator. These explanations are highly irregular for a 7-year-old. The woman was in her 40s, with steel-grey hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that seemed to catalogue every detail for future scrutiny. She had arrived with a clipboard full of forms and an expression that suggested she'd seen every kind of exploitation imaginable. Emma had translated the Dutch portions of the conversation with increasing tension in her voice, and Marcus could feel the walls closing in around them. The authorities were considering placing Emma in temporary foster care while they investigated whether Wilhelmina was a fit guardian for a child displaying such unusual intellectual capabilities. "They think there's something wrong with me," Emma said now, not looking up from her calculus problems. "They've never encountered a child like me, so they assume someone must be coaching me or exploiting my intelligence somehow. They can't understand that this is just who I am." Marcus stopped pacing and sat down on the carpet beside her. "Emma, can I ask you something that might sound strange? Have you always been able to do the things you do? The languages, the mathematics, the sensing people's emotions?" Emma finally looked up from her book, her blue eyes thoughtful. "What do you mean? I mean, did you learn these abilities or have you always had them?" Emma considered this carefully. "The languages come naturally. I hear a new language and somehow understand its patterns within days. The mathematics feels like seeing music written out, if that makes sense. And the emotional sensing, that's been with me as long as I can remember. Grootmoeder says my parents were special people. Brilliant scientists who worked on projects the government wanted to keep classified." A chill ran down Marcus's spine. What kind of scientists? The kind who asked questions that powerful people didn't want answered. "They died when I was 3, in a car accident outside Geneva. But before they died, they left me with something. Grootmoeder won't tell me exactly what. She says I'm not ready to understand yet." "Emma, where exactly did you live before Amsterdam?" Emma's expression grew guarded. "We've moved many times. Geneva, Berlin, Prague, Copenhagen, always at night, always quickly. Grootmoeder says there are people who have been looking for us since my parents died. People who want to use my abilities for purposes that would harm others." As if summoned by her words, Marcus's phone buzzed with an urgent call from his assistant Sarah. Her normally calm voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Marcus, you need to know something immediately. That investor from your meeting, Henrik van der Berg. He's been making inquiries about you and the little girl, very detailed, very specific inquiries, and he's not the only one. I've received calls today from people claiming to be journalists, but their questions were too informed, too focused. They knew details about your meeting that we never made public." Marcus felt his mouth go dry as he looked at Emma, who had gone completely still. Her face had turned pale, and her small hands were trembling against the textbook pages. "How long do we have?" Emma whispered, as if she already knew the answer. "They found us," she said, her 7-year-old voice carrying the weight of someone who had been running her entire life. "They always find us eventually." That night, Marcus stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his hotel suite, watching the Amsterdam streets 20 stories below. The city's famous canals reflected streetlights like scattered diamonds, but Marcus's attention was focused on something far more ominous. 2 men in dark coats who had been standing under the same streetlight for the past 4 hours, their faces occasionally illuminated by the glow of their phones as they maintained surveillance. Emma was staying in the connecting suite with Wilhelmina, who had been discharged that afternoon with strict instructions to rest and take her new medications. Through the thin walls, Marcus could hear them speaking in hushed Dutch, their voices carrying an urgency that needed no translation. At exactly 2 a.m., Emma appeared in his doorway, fully dressed in dark clothes, with a small backpack slung over her shoulders. Her blonde hair was hidden under a knit cap, and her face wore an expression of grim determination that looked wrong on someone so young. "We have to leave immediately," she said without preamble. "Grootmoeder has been monitoring their communications. They're planning to move within the hour." Marcus felt his carefully controlled world spinning further off its axis. "Emma, what exactly is going on? Who are these people, and why are they so interested in you?" Emma's blue eyes reflected the city lights as she looked up at him. "Grootmoeder finally decided to tell me the complete truth about my parents and why we've been running. My mother and father weren't just scientists, Marcus. They were working on something called Project Mindbridge, a classified government program that was attempting to enhance human cognitive and perceptual abilities through genetic and neurological modification." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. "You're telling me you're the result of some kind of genetic experimentation?" "And not just the result," Emma corrected with devastating calm. "I am the experiment. The only successful one. When the project was officially terminated due to ethical concerns, I was already born and demonstrating capabilities far beyond what the researchers had predicted. The government wanted to study me, control me, weaponize my abilities. My parents refused and attempted to flee the country with me. A soft but urgent knock at the suite's main door made them both freeze. Then Wilhelmina's voice, low and strained. "Marcus, they're in the building." Security cameras show men on floors 12 and 15 moving systematically upward. Dace. Within minutes, they were climbing down the hotel's emergency fire escape in the pre-dawn darkness. Marcus carrying hastily packed bags, while Emma guided them through Amsterdam's labyrinthine network of canals and medieval alleys with the practiced confidence of someone who had spent years running from pursuers. "There's a safe house," Wilhelmina explained as they moved through shadows that seemed to swallow their footsteps. "But we can't remain in the Netherlands much longer. They have too many resources here, too many connections with local authorities." "Where can we possibly go?" Marcus asked, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. Emma paused at a canal bridge and looked back at him, her young face illuminated by a distant streetlight. In that moment, she looked simultaneously like a frightened child and an ancient soul who had seen too much of the world's darkness. "America," she said simply. "Your country. It's large enough for us to disappear, and you have the resources to help us stay hidden. But Marcus, you need to understand. If you help us, you'll be putting your own life in danger. These people don't just observe and retreat. They eliminate obstacles." As sirens wailed in the distance, growing steadily closer, Marcus realized his methodically planned, carefully controlled existence was about to become something he had never imagined. But looking into Emma's trusting blue eyes, seeing the fragile hope mixed with bone-deep fear, he knew there was only one choice his conscience would allow him to make. "Then let's go home," he said, and meant it more than any words he had ever spoken. The next morning found them in a cramped apartment above a century-old bakery in Amsterdam's oldest district, where the smell of fresh bread mixed with the musty odor of ancient wood and secrets. Wilhelmina spread an array of documents across a scarred wooden table, birth certificates, medical records, government files so heavily redacted they looked like abstract art painted in black ink. Marcus studied the papers with growing horror and fascination. Official letterheads from agencies he'd never heard of, technical reports filled with terminology that sounded like science fiction, and photographs of laboratory equipment that looked more like instruments of torture than scientific research. Project Mindbridge was officially terminated in March 2018, Wilhelmina explained, her weathered hands trembling as she poured coffee from a dented metal pot. But the man who conceived and directed the program, Dr. Richard Holbrook, never accepted the government's decision to shut down his life's work. He's been tracking Emma ever since, convinced she represents the key to perfecting his research and proving his theories about human potential. Marcus examined a photograph of a stern-faced man in his 60s, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they observed. "How do you know so much about the internal details of this program?" Wilhelmina's coffee cup rattled against its saucer as she set it down. When she looked up, her eyes were filled with tears and a guilt that seemed to have been eating at her soul for years. "Because I wasn't just Emma's grandmother by marriage," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was Dr. Holbrook's primary research partner. I helped design the protocols that created the cognitive enhancements Emma was born with. I am one of the people responsible for making her into what she is." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow, stealing his breath and making the room spin around him. Emma, who had been sitting quietly in the corner solving a complex chess puzzle she'd found in the apartment, looked up calmly. "You figured this out, didn't you?" Marcus asked her, his voice hoarse with shock. Emma nodded with the matter-of-fact acceptance that seemed to characterize her approach to earth-shattering revelations. Last year, the way Grootmoeder knew exactly which foods enhanced my cognitive function, how she understood my limitations before I'd even explained them, why she was never surprised by anything I could do or learn. She wasn't just protecting me from strangers, she was protecting me from the consequences of her own scientific achievements. Wilhelmina's composure finally cracked, and tears streamed down her lined cheeks. Emma's parents volunteered for the program because they believed they were helping humanity evolve, pushing the boundaries of what the human mind could accomplish. But when Emma was born, with capabilities that exceeded our wildest projections, the government wanted to turn her into a weapon. Her parents refused to allow that and attempted to escape with her. The car accident wasn't an accident, Emma finished quietly, her young voice carrying knowledge that no child should possess. Marcus felt physically ill. So you've been running and hiding for 4 years. No, 4 years, 7 months and 12 days, Emma corrected with mathematical precision. But Dr. Holbrook is getting closer to finding us. He has funding from private military contractors now, people who don't care about international laws or ethical guidelines. They simply want to replicate and weaponize what I represent. Marcus looked at the documents again, his analytical mind automatically processing the implications even as his heart broke for what this child had endured. How close are they to capturing you? Wilhelmina pulled out a smartphone with a cracked screen and showed him a text message that had arrived just 1 hour ago. We know about the American businessman and his hotel. Bring the subject to the coordinates we've provided by midnight tonight, or we will make the retrieval significantly more difficult for everyone involved. This is not a negotiation. Emma stood up from her chess puzzle, her small frame somehow commanding the attention of everyone in the room. Grootmoeder, it's time to tell him about the rest of it. What rest? Marcus asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. Emma walked to the apartment's single window and looked out at the grey Amsterdam morning, her reflection ghost-like in the old glass. Dr. Holbrook isn't just hunting me because of what I can do now, Marcus. He's hunting me because my cognitive and perceptual abilities are still developing, still growing stronger. According to his research projections, when I reach full neurological maturity around age 16, I'll be capable of mental feats that could revolutionize human understanding. She turned back to face him, and for just a moment, Marcus could have sworn her blue eyes flickered with an inner light that had nothing to do with the morning sun, or destroy civilization as we know it. 18 hours later, Marcus found himself doing something he never imagined possible. Smuggling a 7-year-old genius and her fugitive grandmother across international borders using his corporate jet and connections he'd cultivated over 2 decades of legitimate business. The irony wasn't lost on him that his reputation for absolute ethical integrity was now being used to transport what the authorities would certainly consider stolen government property. Are you sure about this? Marcus asked Wilhelmina as they sat in the luxurious cabin of his private Gulfstream, flying over the Atlantic at 37,000 feet. Emma was curled up in a leather seat near the window, seemingly asleep, but with her fingers subtly moving in patterns that suggested she was working through complex mathematical equations in her mind. Wilhelmina's weathered face was pale with exhaustion and worry. There's no going back now, Marcus. The moment you helped us leave Amsterdam, you became part of this whether you intended to or not. Dr. Holbrook's people have resources that span continents. They'll be waiting for us in America, just as they were waiting in the Netherlands. Marcus loosened his tie and rubbed his temples, where a headache had been building for hours. What exactly am I walking into? You keep talking about these people like they're some kind of shadow organization, but who are they really? Government agents? Private contractors? Corporate spies? All of the above, Emma said quietly without opening her eyes. And worse, Dr. Holbrook has convinced certain military and intelligence communities that people like me represent the next stage of human evolution, or human weaponization, depending on your perspective. They see my abilities not as a gift to be nurtured, but as a resource to be harvested and replicated. She finally opened her eyes and turned to look at Marcus, and he was struck again by how ancient those blue eyes seemed in such a young face. Marcus, I need you to understand something. When we land in California, my abilities are going to become stronger. Something about being in my birth country accelerates the development. Grootmoeder has been giving me suppressant medications for years to slow the process, but we left them behind in Amsterdam. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. What does that mean exactly? It means, Wilhelmina said with devastating quiet, that within days of landing, Emma will start demonstrating capabilities that will be impossible to hide. And when that happens, every intelligence agency in the world will know exactly where we are. Marcus looked out the aircraft window at the endless expanse of ocean below and realized he was no longer just helping a child in need. He was harboring what might be the most dangerous and valuable person on Earth. There's something else, Emma added, her voice so soft he had to strain to hear it over the engines. I've been sensing something ever since we took off. Someone on this plane isn't who they claim to be. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. What do you mean? Emma's eyes were now wide open and alert, scanning the cabin with an intensity that made the hair on Marcus's arms stand up. One of your crew members, their emotional signature is all wrong. They're not afraid or concerned like the others. They're excited, anticipatory, like they're waiting for something to happen. Before Marcus could respond, the intercom crackled to life with the pilot's voice. Mr. Wellington, we've received instructions to divert to a military airfield in Newfoundland for an emergency inspection. I'm sorry, sir, but it's not optional. Emma grabbed Marcus's hand, and he could feel her small fingers trembling. They found us, she whispered. They found us before we even reached America. The military airfield in Newfoundland was a stark landscape of concrete and chain-link fences, with wind that cut through clothing like icy knives. As their jet taxied to a stop, Marcus could see black SUVs waiting on the tarmac, their windows tinted so dark they looked like predatory eyes. Mr. Wellington, the pilot announced over the intercom, his voice strangely formal. Please remain seated until the inspection team boards the aircraft. Emma's hand was still gripping Marcus's, and he could feel her pulse racing. The co-pilot, she whispered urgently. It's the co-pilot. I can sense his satisfaction, his relief that this is almost over. He's been reporting our location the entire flight. Wilhelmina had gone completely white, her breathing shallow and rapid. Marcus, they're going to separate us. Whatever happens, don't let them take Emma alone. Promise me. Before Marcus could respond, the aircraft door opened with a pneumatic hiss, and 3 figures climbed aboard. The man in the lead was tall and angular, with silver hair and the kind of pale eyes that seemed to catalogue every detail for future analysis. Behind him came 2 younger operatives, their movements efficient and predatory. Dr. Richard Holbrook, the man introduced himself, extending a hand that Marcus pointedly ignored. Mr. Wellington, I want to thank you for taking such excellent care of our missing research subject. Your assistance in this matter will not be forgotten. Emma stood up slowly, and Marcus was amazed by the dignity she managed to project, despite being a 7-year-old facing her worst nightmare. Hello, Dr. Holbrook. You look exactly like your photographs. Holbrook's smile was the kind that never reached his eyes. Hello, Emma. You've grown considerably since our last surveillance photos. I'm very much looking forward to resuming our work together. I'm not going with you. Emma said with calm certainty. "And neither is Grootmoeder." Holbrook's laugh was like breaking glass. "I'm afraid you don't have a choice in the matter, my dear. You see, Mr. Wellington's assistance in transporting you across international borders has actually made this much simpler for us. By helping you flee the Netherlands, he's committed several serious crimes. The only way he avoids prosecution is by cooperating fully with our recovery operation." Marcus felt the walls closing in around him, but also felt something else, a cold anger building in his chest. "You orchestrated this entire thing, didn't you? The meeting in Amsterdam, the sick translator, even Emma being at that flower stand. None of it was coincidence." "Very good, Mr. Wellington. Your reputation for intelligence is well deserved. We've been maneuvering Emma towards someone with your specific combination of resources and moral weaknesses for months. A wealthy man with a savior complex was exactly what we needed to transport her out of a jurisdiction where we had political complications." Emma's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "You made a mistake, Dr. Holbrook." "Oh, and what might that be?" Emma's blue eyes began to take on that strange inner light Marcus had glimpsed before, but now it was unmistakable and growing brighter. "You assumed I was still the same frightened child you've been chasing for 4 years. But my abilities have been developing during our flight, just like Grootmoeder warned, and right now I can sense something you can't." Holbrook's confident expression faltered slightly. "What are you talking about?" Emma smiled, and for the first time since Marcus had met her, it was the smile of someone who held all the cards. "Your operatives outside, the ones in the black vehicles, they're not your people anymore. Someone else has been tracking this operation, and they just took control of your entire team." As if summoned by her words, gunfire erupted outside the aircraft, followed by shouting and the sound of vehicles moving at high speed. "It seems," Emma continued with devastating calm, "that we're not the only ones who've been hunted. You have enemies too, Dr. Holbrook, and they've been waiting for exactly this moment to take their revenge." The gunfight outside lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, Emma counted, her enhanced hearing tracking every shot and movement with mathematical precision. When silence finally fell over the airfield, Dr. A. Holbrook's confidence had evaporated entirely, replaced by the kind of fear that comes from realizing you've been outmaneuvered by forces you didn't even know existed. "Who are they?" Holbrook demanded, peering through the aircraft's small windows at the scene outside. His 2 operatives had drawn weapons and were speaking urgently into radio devices that apparently weren't responding. Emma tilted her head as if listening to something the adults couldn't hear. "They're American intelligence. Not the agencies you're used to dealing with. This is a black operations unit that specializes in containing projects like yours when they go rogue. They've been investigating Project Mindbridge since my parents died, trying to understand why 2 of their former assets were murdered." Marcus felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. "Your parents worked for the government?" "Not directly," Wilhelmina said, her voice tight with tension. "They were consultants, brought in because of their expertise in cognitive enhancement and genetic psychology. When they realized what the project was really designed to accomplish, creating enhanced humans for military and intelligence applications, they tried to withdraw from the program." The aircraft door opened again, and this time the figure who climbed aboard was a woman in her 40s with short dark hair and the kind of steady gaze that suggested she'd seen every form of human evil and wasn't impressed by any of it. She wore tactical gear, but moved with the controlled precision of someone who preferred negotiation to violence when possible. "Dr. Holbrook," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "My name is Agent Sarah Chen, and you're under arrest for multiple violations of international law, including the murder of Dr. James and Dr. Catherine Morrison 4 years ago." Holbrook's face went ashen. "You can't prove anything." The Morrisons died in an automobile accident. Actually, we can prove quite a bit. Your organization has been remarkably careless with its digital communications over the past year. We have recordings, financial records, and testimony from 3 of your former operatives who decided cooperation was preferable to prosecution. Agent Chen turned to Emma, and her expression softened noticeably. Emma Morrison, I presume. My team has been looking for you for a very long time. Your parents were heroes who died trying to protect you from people like Dr. Holbrook. We're here to make sure their sacrifice wasn't in vain. Emma studied the agent with that unnervingly intense gaze. You're telling the truth about wanting to protect me, but you're not telling the whole truth about why. Your agency wants to study me too, doesn't it? You just want to do it more ethically than Dr. Holbrook. Agent Chen's slight smile suggested she was impressed rather than surprised by Emma's perceptiveness. Very good. Yes, there are people in our organization who believe your abilities could benefit humanity if properly understood and voluntarily shared. But the key word there is voluntarily. We're not in the business of turning children into weapons. Marcus found his voice. What happens now? Now, Mr. Wellington, you're going to face some very serious questions about your role in this situation. Transporting what is technically classified government property across international borders carries significant penalties. However, your cooperation in helping us apprehend Dr. Holbrook will be taken into consideration. Emma stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice carried an authority that seemed impossible from someone so young. Agent Chen, I appreciate your offer of protection, but I'm not classified government property. I'm a 7-year-old girl whose abilities developed naturally as a result of genetic modifications my parents consented to before I was born. Dr. Holbrook and his people murdered my parents and have been hunting me for years. Marcus saved my life and my grandmother's life, and I won't allow him to be punished for doing the right thing. The silence that followed Emma's declaration was profound. Agent Chen stared at the child with a mixture of respect and something that might have been fear. Emma, Chen said carefully, your abilities are clearly remarkable, but this is a complex legal and political situation that is about to become much more complex, Emma interrupted, her eyes beginning to glow with that strange inner light again. Because while we've been talking, I've been sensing the approach of another aircraft. A much larger one, carrying people whose intentions toward me are far worse than Dr. Holbrook's. As if summoned by her words, the sound of heavy rotors filled the air, growing steadily louder. The real hunters just arrived, Emma said quietly, and this time they're not interested in taking me alive. The approaching helicopter was military grade, its black hull reflecting no light as it descended toward the airfield like a mechanical vulture. Through the aircraft's windows, Marcus could see Agent Chen's team scrambling for defensive positions, but their movements carried the urgency of people who knew they were outgunned and outmaneuvered. "Who are they?" Marcus demanded. But Emma had gone completely still, her young face pale and her eyes unfocused as if she were listening to voices only she could hear. Dr. Holbrook, who had been silent since Agent Chen's arrival, suddenly laughed, a sound devoid of humor that sent chills down Marcus's spine. "You fools," he said, looking directly at Agent Chen. "You think your little domestic intelligence operation understands what you're dealing with? These are the real players, the ones who fund projects like MindBridge from the shadows. They don't care about legal niceties or ethical considerations." Agent Chen spoke rapidly into her radio, coordinating her team's response, but Marcus could see the grim determination in her expression that suggested she knew this was a fight they couldn't win through conventional means. Emma suddenly grabbed Marcus's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Marcus, I need you to listen very carefully. Everything we've been told about my abilities, about Project Mindbridge, about why people want me. Most of it has been incomplete. The truth is much more complicated. Wilhelmina, who had been watching the approaching helicopter with the resignation of someone who had been running too long, finally spoke. "Tell him, Emma. He's earned the right to know what he's really been protecting." Emma took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice carried a weight that seemed impossible from someone so young. "I'm not just the result of genetic enhancement, Marcus. The modifications my parents underwent were designed to create something specific, a human being capable of interfacing directly with advanced artificial intelligence systems. I'm not just enhanced. I'm designed to be a bridge between human consciousness and machine intelligence." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. "What does that mean?" "It means," Dr. Holbrook said with obvious relish, "that she represents the next stage of human evolution, or the end of it, depending on your perspective. With the right equipment, Emma could potentially merge human intuition and creativity with the processing power of supercomputers. She could solve problems that would take teams of scientists decades to understand. She could predict economic trends, military strategies, even social movements with unprecedented accuracy." Agent Chen stopped her radio conversation and stared at Emma. "That's why everyone wants you. You're not just a person with enhanced abilities. You're potentially the most powerful intelligence asset that's ever existed." Emma nodded gravely. "And that's why the people in that helicopter are willing to kill everyone here to get me. They don't represent any government, Marcus. They represent the kind of private interests that view human beings as resources to be exploited. If they get their hands on me, I'll spend the rest of my life as a living computer, solving problems that will make them unimaginably wealthy and powerful." The helicopter had landed now, and through the windows, Marcus could see heavily armed figures moving toward their aircraft with military precision. But Emma was standing now, and the strange light in her eyes was growing brighter. "There's something else," she said, her voice taking on a quality that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones. "During our flight, being back in American airspace, my abilities didn't just grow stronger, they evolved. I can now do something that Dr. Holbrook never anticipated, something that Project Mindbridge was never designed to achieve." "What?" Marcus whispered. Emma smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked exactly like what she was. A 7-year-old girl who had just realized she held more power than the adults who had been trying to control her. "I can turn my abilities off," she said simply, "and more importantly, I can turn them on in other people. The genetic modifications that created me. I can now replicate them in others through direct contact. I can create more people like me." The silence that followed this revelation was broken by the sound of the aircraft door being forced open. But as the first armed figure appeared in the doorway, Emma reached out and touched Agent Chen's hand. "Would you like to experience what I experience?" Emma asked quietly. "Would you like to help me make sure no one can ever hunt children like me again?" Agent Chen looked into Emma's glowing blue eyes, and without hesitation nodded. The transformation began immediately, and Marcus realized he was witnessing something that would change the world forever. What happened next defied every assumption Marcus had about the nature of reality. As Emma's small hand touched Agent Chen's, a visible energy seemed to flow between them. Not light exactly, but something that made the air itself shimmer and pulse with potential. Agent Chen's eyes widened, then began to glow with the same inner luminescence that marked Emma's enhanced state. "I can feel it," Chen whispered, her voice filled with wonder and terror in equal measure. "I can sense every person on this airfield, their intentions, their fears, their capabilities. This is what you experience all the time?" Emma nodded, her young face grave with the weight of knowledge. "This is just the beginning. The full transformation takes several hours, But even this initial connection will give you abilities far beyond normal human limitations. The armed figures were moving through the aircraft now, their weapons trained on the small group. Their leader was a woman in her 50s, with dead eyes, and the kind of smile that suggested she enjoyed other people's suffering. "Dr. Emma Morrison," the woman said, her voice carrying a slight accent that Marcus couldn't place. "My name is Director Kozlov, and I represent certain international interests that have been very patient while others played their little games with you. That patience is now exhausted." Emma stood up, and despite being less than 4 feet tall, she somehow commanded the attention of everyone in the cramped aircraft cabin. "Director Kozlov, I know exactly who you represent. Private military contractors, weapons developers, and intelligence brokers who see human beings as commodities to be bought and sold. You've been funding Dr. Holbrook's research from the beginning, haven't you?" Kozlov's smile widened. "Very good. Yes, my organization provided the real financial backing for Project Mindbridge. Dr. Holbrook's government contracts were merely a convenient cover story. We've been developing enhanced humans for military and intelligence applications for over a decade. And murdering anyone who gets in your way," Agent Chen added, her newly enhanced senses apparently allowing her to read micro-expressions and vocal stress patterns with superhuman accuracy. "You're responsible for at least 47 deaths over the past 5 years, including Emma's parents." Director Kozlov shrugged as if discussing the weather. "Acceptable losses in service of a greater cause." Emma's abilities represent a paradigm shift in human capability. With the right training and equipment, she could give our clients decisive advantages in economic warfare, military strategy, and social manipulation. The applications are virtually limitless. Marcus felt sick listening to this casual discussion of using a child as a weapon, but Emma seemed remarkably calm. "Director Kozlov, you're making the same mistake that Dr. Holbrook made. You're assuming I'm still a helpless child who can be controlled and manipulated." "Oh." Kozlov's tone carried amusement. "And what exactly can a 7-year-old girl do against trained operatives with military-grade weapons?" Emma reached out and touched Marcus's hand. The sensation was like being struck by lightning made of pure consciousness. Suddenly, Marcus could sense not just the emotions and intentions of everyone in the aircraft, but their precise physiological states, their stress levels, even their muscle tension and reaction times. "This," Emma said simply, and then she touched Wilhelmina and Dr. Holbrook. And before anyone could stop her, she reached out and made contact with one of Kozlov's operatives. The transformation rippled through the aircraft like a wave, and suddenly half the people in the confined space possessed enhanced cognitive and perceptual abilities that allowed them to sense each other's thoughts, intentions, and capabilities with startling clarity. "You've created enhanced humans before," Emma said to Kozlov, whose confident expression was rapidly crumbling. "But you've never faced them as opponents, have you? You've never had to fight people who can anticipate your every move, sense your every intention, and coordinate their responses with perfect understanding of each other's capabilities." Marcus realized he could sense exactly what Emma was planning, and so could Agent Chen, Wilhelmina, and even the operative Emma had touched. They moved as one, with perfect coordination, disarming Kozlov's remaining operatives before the unenhanced humans could even process what was happening. But as they subdued the threat, Marcus became aware of something else Emma was sensing. Aircraft approaching from multiple directions, carrying people whose intentions toward them were anything but friendly. "Emma," he said quietly, "how many more of them are there?" Emma's blue eyes were now blazing with an inner fire that seemed to illuminate the entire aircraft. "All of them, Marcus. Every intelligence agency, every private military contractor, every government that has heard rumors about what I can do. They're all coming now." She looked around at the small group of newly enhanced humans surrounding her, and her expression carried a determination that seemed impossible from someone so young. But this time, I'm not running. This time, we're going to end this permanently. The final confrontation came not as Marcus had expected, with violence and chaos, but with something far more profound, a demonstration of what humanity could become when it chose cooperation over domination. As aircraft filled the grey Newfoundland sky like mechanical vultures circling their prey, Emma stood in the center of the airfield with her small group of newly enhanced allies. Director Kozlov and Dr. Holbrook sat restrained nearby, their expressions shifting between rage and fascination as they watched the 7-year-old girl who had outmaneuvered every adult who had tried to control her. "There are 43 aircraft approaching," Agent Chen reported, her enhanced senses tracking movements that would have been invisible to unaugmented humans. Military, intelligence, and private contractor. They represent at least 12 different nations and 6 major corporate interests. Marcus, still adjusting to the overwhelming sensory input of his enhanced state, could feel the intentions of the approaching forces like pressure against his consciousness. "Emma, there are too many of them. Even with our abilities, we can't fight entire armies." Emma smiled, and for the first time since Marcus had met her, it was the uncomplicated smile of a child who knew something wonderful that the adults around her hadn't figured out yet. "Marcus, who said anything about fighting?" She walked to the center of the airfield, her small figure somehow commanding attention, despite being dwarfed by the military vehicles and aircraft surrounding them. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the concrete expanse, amplified by some property of her enhanced abilities that Marcus didn't understand. "To everyone who has come here today," Emma called out, "I want you to know that I understand why you're here. You see me as a resource, a weapon, a solution to problems you believe require force and control to solve. But you're wrong about what I am, and you're wrong about what I can do." The first aircraft had landed now, disgorging teams of operatives who moved with military precision toward Emma's position. But instead of retreating or preparing for battle, Emma began walking toward them, her hands extended in a gesture of greeting rather than surrender. "I am not a weapon," she continued, her young voice somehow reaching every person on the airfield, despite the noise of engines and rotors. "I am a bridge. A connection between what humanity is and what it could become. And the gift I carry isn't meant to be hoarded by the powerful or used to dominate the weak. It's meant to be shared." The lead operative, a man in tactical gear with the bearing of someone accustomed to command, raised his weapon. "Stay where you are. You're coming with us." Emma stopped walking and tilted her head, studying him with those impossibly blue eyes. "What's your name?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "That's not relevant." "It is to me. My name is Emma Morrison. I'm 7 years old. I love chess and mathematics and languages, and my favorite food is stroopwafels." "What's your name?" Despite himself, the operative hesitated. "Sergeant David Rodriguez." "Sergeant Rodriguez, do you have children?" Another hesitation. "A daughter. She's 6. Emma smiled gently. "What would you want for her, Sergeant? A world where children with unusual abilities are hunted and turned into weapons, or a world where those abilities are nurtured and shared to help everyone?" "That's not. This isn't about what I want. This is about following orders." "Whose orders? And for what purpose?" Emma took another step forward, close enough now that Rodriguez would have to look down to maintain eye contact. "Sergeant, I'm going to show you something, not to hurt you or control you, but to help you understand what's really at stake here." Before Rodriguez could respond, Emma reached out and touched his gloved hand. The transformation was immediate and visible. Rodriguez's eyes widened, then began to glow with the same inner light that marked Emma's enhanced state. But more than that, his entire posture changed, as if he were seeing the world clearly for the first time. "My God," he whispered, "I can feel everyone, their fear, their confusion, their pain. The people giving the orders, they're not trying to protect anyone, they're trying to profit from suffering." Emma turned to address the growing crowd of operatives, intelligence agents, and military personnel who had converged on the airfield. "This is what I'm offering all of you. Not control, not domination, but understanding. The ability to sense truth from lies, to feel the real motivations behind the orders you're given, to know when you're being asked to cause harm rather than prevent it." And then, in a moment that Marcus knew would be remembered as the turning point of human history, Emma began moving through the crowd, touching hands, making brief contact with person after person. The transformation spread like ripples on a pond, enhanced consciousness, expanded empathy, and most importantly, the ability to see through the lies and manipulations that had brought them all to this place. Within an hour, what had begun as a military operation to capture a single child had become something unprecedented. A gathering of enhanced humans who could sense each other's true intentions and coordinate their actions for the genuine good of humanity. Director Kozlov, watching from her restraints, spoke with bitter resignation. "You have no idea what you've done, child. The people I represent won't accept this. They'll find ways to counter your abilities, to turn them against you." Emma walked over to the woman who had represented so much evil in her young life. "Director Kozlov, you're absolutely right. The people you represent will try to stop this. But you're forgetting something important." Emma reached out and, despite Kozlov's attempts to pull away, touched her hand. The change in Kozlov was dramatic and immediate. The cold calculation in her eyes gave way to horror, then grief, as she experienced for the first time the full emotional weight of the suffering she had caused over the years. "The people you represent," Emma said gently, "they only have power because others follow their orders without question. But when people can sense truth directly, when they can feel the real consequences of their actions, when they understand the connections between all living things, those orders become impossible to follow." Marcus, watching this unprecedented transformation of human consciousness, felt tears streaming down his face. "Emma, what happens now? How do we build a world where this gift is protected and nurtured instead of feared and exploited?" Emma looked up at him with those blazing blue eyes, and Marcus realized that somewhere in the past week she had become more than just a remarkable child he was protecting. She had become the daughter he had never had, and he had become the father she had lost. "Now, Marcus, we go home. We build something new. We create schools where children with abilities like mine can learn and grow safely. We establish networks of enhanced individuals who can work together to solve problems that seem impossible today. We show the world that evolution doesn't have to come through conflict and domination." She took his hand, and Wilhelmina's, and together they walked toward the aircraft that would take them back to America. Behind them, hundreds of newly enhanced individuals were already organizing themselves, planning how to return to their home countries and begin the careful work of transforming human civilization from within. "And Marcus?" Emma added as they climbed aboard the plane, "We're going to need a very good lawyer, because what we're about to do is going to be completely legal, totally ethical, and absolutely revolutionary." As their plane lifted off into the clear afternoon sky, Marcus looked down at the airfield where everything had changed. Emma was curled up against Wilhelmina, finally sleeping the peaceful sleep of a child who no longer had to run or hide. And for the first time in a week that had transformed his entire understanding of what was possible, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years, absolute certainty that the future was going to be better than the past. The hunt was over. The real adventure was just beginning.